It's September 12 and we are on the Siffleur Falls trail. It's an 8-kilometer trail. Well, there's varying reports, 8 to 10 kilometers. And it's supposed to be really excellent. And there's lots of people already. It's 10 in the morning when we're getting going. So it's a popular trail, but it's still gonna be great. Good thing I have spray and my mama with me. We camped at 2 o'clock creek last night and the price is $29 or $27 if you're a senior, and you get 12 pieces of wood for that price. So it was nice to have a little campfire, but it seems a bit expensive. There's just pit toilets and no running water. But I'm very grateful for my camper. This area is coming from Rocky Mountain House heading towards Banff. So this not quite into the park is where this spectacular spot is. This river beside me is the North Saskatchewan River, and its headwaters are not far from here at the Columbia ice fields. There's actually a glacier called the Saskatchewan Glacier, and this river makes its way joining other rivers all the way to Lake Winnipeg in Manitoba. Amazingly and very cool, the Tanaha or Kootenai Nation was first living in this area, and then other Aboriginal tribes came along afterwards. But the Kootenays are where I live, so they really had a big territory back in the early 1800s. Wow, a nice boardwalk. This is an ecological area, so they're trying to preserve it. Whenever I read the Bible through, Genesis 3 always makes me cry, because it's the saddest chapter in the whole Bible, I feel, because I know how ugly things turn after that. You know, there wouldn't have been any sin if there was no law. But if there was no law, there would be no life. Think about that one. Because of how God had to deal with Satan, man had to be tested. Otherwise, Satan could accuse him of micromanaging us and not giving us any free choice. And we'd all be like robots that way. God wanted people who loved and obeyed him because they wanted to, not because they were forced to. All Adam and Eve had to do was tend to the Garden of Eden and stay away from, or don't eat from, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. What an easy test God gave them to do. He was so merciful. It wasn't some physical endurance test or mind-bending exercise or having to physically battle Satan. All they had to do was not eat of some fruit. These were God's children. They were created perfect. And I'm sure God walked and talked with them in the garden and told them all about Satan and his rebellion. He wouldn't have created them and then just let them fend for themselves. He's a merciful God. He would protect them and warn them, and for sure, you don't just throw somebody to the wolves that you've just created. But sadly, all of us know what happened next. We don't know how long they were in the garden before Eve was tempted. Probably not too long. Satan doesn't dilly-dally. Siffleur is the French word for whistling, and in 1858 Sir James Hector named this area Siffleur Mountain, and area after the hoary marmot, because the hoary marmot gives a loud whistle for its call. So this area is named after hoary marmots. Okay, Mom, let's hear your Sifleur. Oh, there you go. When Eve ate the fruit after being deceived, she broke at least 4 of the 10 commandments. Thou shalt not covet, steal, murder, or have any other gods before God. She coveted the fruit and then stole God's property. Then she gave it to her husband, violating the 6th commandment of thou shalt not murder. Okay, she didn't force him to eat it, but he did eat it, and so the death sentence was pronounced upon him. Therefore, she was an accomplice in his murder. Then she broke the 1st commandment because she placed Satan before God in her esteem, and she obeyed him rather than God. What I've realized is that breaking God's law usually involves more than one part of the law. You don't just break one point. As James says in chapter 2, verse 10, if you stumble in one point, you're guilty of breaking them all. And this story of Eve is a perfect example of that. We must realize that God's law is eternal. It has always been and it always will be. But it's beautiful because it's a law of love. And in this story, we must take away that sin in any degree is offensive to God. Adam and Eve knew that they were formed from the dust of the ground. And so how devastated they must have been when God told them that they were going to return and become dust of the ground again. Think about that one. But hallelujah, there is hope because of Jesus and his promise of forgiving us when we break his law. And that will be talked about in future hikes. September is certainly a beautiful time of year to hike. No bugs right now and perfect temperatures. This Siffleur Falls trail gets a 4.5 out of 5 from me. Lots of people on a Saturday afternoon, but the magnificent 360-degree mountains all around and this water, pretty spectacular. So yeah, I recommend this trail. The topic today was a sad, heartbreaking one. How we're all affected by 2 people's decision to eat some fruit. However, God has promised to get us out of this mess. So until my next epic adventure, assalamu alaikum, shalom, peace.
When I'm low in spirit, I cry, Lord, lift me up. I want to go higher with thee. But the Lord knows I can't live on a mountain. So he picked out a valley for me. He leads me beside still waters. Somewhere in the valley below, he draws me aside to be tested and tried. But in the valley he restoreth my soul. When it's dark as a dungeon and the sun seldom shines, I question, Lord, why must this be? But he tells me there's strength in my sorrows, and there's victory in trials for me. He leads me beside still waters, somewhere in the valley below. He draws me aside to be tested and tried. But in the valley he restoreth my soul. But in the valley he restoreth my soul. My